Since the first man looked into the eyes of the second and realized he could control him, humanity has never ceased fighting a silent war, not for territory, not for gold, but for something infinitely more valuable: dominion over the soul of another. And what if I told you that the keys to winning this war were written 5 centuries ago by a man who dared to reveal the naked truth about human nature? Niccolò Machiavelli was not merely a Florentine politician. He was an anatomist of the human soul, a surgeon who dissected the entrails of power and manipulation with the precision of a scientist. In his time, he was considered too dangerous. Today, we call his works classics. But the truth remains, Machiavelli understood that we live surrounded by social predators, people who use our kindness, our naivety, and our need for connection as weapons against ourselves. Have you ever felt trapped in a relationship where it seemed you were always losing? Where your words were twisted, your emotions manipulated, your energy drained? Where you became a shadow of who you really are? This is no accident. This is strategy. In the next 25 minutes, we won't simply list rules. We're going to dive into Machiavelli's own mind and extract a complete psychological arsenal to identify, neutralize, and escape toxic relationships. Prepare yourself, for the knowledge you're about to receive will not only transform your relationships, it will transform your perception of human nature itself. This is the manual they don't want you to know. Law 1. Observe before acting. The principle of the silent spy. Machiavelli's first law for relationships is simple, yet revolutionary. Observe actions, not words, for while words lie, actions reveal the naked truth of the human soul. Why do we observe so little and speak so much? Because our social nature conditions us to trust language as a tool of connection. But Machiavelli knew that language is also the perfect tool of manipulation. The manipulator uses words like a magician uses cards to distract you from the reality unfolding right before your eyes. Observe Cesare Borgia, the bastard son of the Pope, whom Machiavelli so admired. When Borgia arrived in a new city, he didn't make grandiose speeches about his intentions. He observed. He studied who held real power, who influenced whom, where the cracks in the social structure lay. Only after completely mapping the human terrain did he act. And when he acted, it was with surgical precision. In Senegalia, Borgia invited his enemies to a reconciliation banquet. They came, trusting his sweet words. All were executed before dessert. Borgia had observed that they planned to betray him, and their actions revealed their true intentions. In modern toxic relationships, this translates thus: completely ignore what the person says about their intentions, their feelings, their plans. Observe only what they do. The partner who says, "I love you," but constantly belittles your achievements. The friend who speaks of loyalty but spreads your secrets. The boss who promises promotions but sabotages your opportunities. Actions are the language of truth. Practice Machiavellian observation. For 1 week, note the discrepancies between words and actions of people around you. Create a behavioral map. Who actually does what they say they'll do? You'll be shocked by what you discover. Law 2. Control information. The mental fortress strategy. Whoever controls information controls power. This is not just a political maxim. It's the essence of psychological self-defense. Your vulnerability is born from what you reveal about yourself. Human beings have a primitive need to be understood, to be seen. It's this need that makes us easy prey. Machiavelli understood that premature intimacy is a trap. You hand over your weaknesses before knowing the other's intentions. It's like giving the map of your vulnerabilities to an armed stranger. Machiavelli's own life illustrates this perfectly. When the Medici returned to power in Florence, Machiavelli was tortured and exiled on suspicion of conspiracy. Do you know why? Because he had been too transparent about his political opinions, had revealed his strategies, his alliances, Transparency nearly killed him. It was in exile, writing The Prince, that he realized political survival and personal survival depends on the capacity to keep certain cards always hidden. Toxic relationships feed on information. The manipulator needs to know your fears, your insecurities, your weak points to use them against you. How many times have you trusted your deepest secrets to someone who later used them as weapons? How many times was your vulnerability transformed into ammunition? Implement the 3-level rule. Surface information, name work for acquaintances. Medium information, opinions, some fears for friends. Deep information, traumas, greatest vulnerability, only for people who have proven, through actions, not words, to be worthy of absolute trust. Law 3. Never react emotionally. The mask of control. Emotion is the fuel of manipulation. Whoever can provoke your anger controls your actions. Emotional reaction, it's the death of strategy. Machiavelli saw emotions as tools, useful when controlled, destructive when they control us. The manipulator is a specialist in provoking emotional reactions because they know that an emotionally dysregulated person doesn't think strategically. They only react, and whoever reacts loses. Consider the fall of Mark Antony, a brilliant general, an astute politician, a man who could have governed Rome. What was his ruin? Cleopatra knew exactly how to provoke his emotions, his passion, his anger, his pride. Every strategic decision by Antony became filtered through his emotional reactions. The result? He lost a war he should have won, lost an empire, lost his life. Octavian, his enemy, won, not because he was a better general, but because he remained cold, calculating, immune to emotional provocations. The toxic partner who knows exactly which buttons to push to make you explode. The boss who knows how to make you insecure during a negotiation. The manipulative friend who uses your insecurities to make you take decisions that benefit them. All are unconscious students of Machiavelli. They know that controlling your emotions is controlling your choices. Develop the strategic pause. When you feel a strong emotion being provoked, count mentally to 10 and ask, what does this person gain if I react this way? Practice the neutral response. Interesting. I'll think about it. This phrase disarms any provocation and gives you time to think strategically. Law 4. Identify true motives. The archaeology of intention. Behind every human action lies a hidden motive. The wise discover this motive before responding to the action. No one acts without reason. Discover the real reason, not the declared one. Machiavelli taught that human beings rarely admit their true motives, not even to themselves. We create noble narratives to justify selfish desires. The power of Machiavellian observation lies in penetrating this layer of self-deception and seeing what really moves a person. When Machiavelli analyzed Cesare Borgia, he wasn't impressed by speeches about unifying Italy for the good of the people. He saw the truth. Borgia wanted absolute power, and all his political moves served this objective. When Borgia liberated cities from tyranny, it wasn't out of kindness. It was because local tyrants threatened his own power. When he made alliances, it wasn't for diplomacy. It was to eliminate enemies one by one. Understanding the true motives allowed Machiavelli to predict Borgia's actions with mathematical precision. The person who constantly offers unsolicited help. What's the real motive? Troll? Feeling superior? Creating dependency? The partner who is excessively jealous? Is it love or need for possession? The colleague who always has suggestions for your work? Is it collaboration or disguised sabotage? Use the hidden benefit rule. For each person's action, ask, who else benefits from this besides the person acting? And then, does this hidden benefit explain the action better than the declared motive? The answer will reveal more about the person than years of conversations. So far, we've established the fundamental pillars of Machiavellian self-defense: observation that penetrates masks, information control that protects your mental fortress, emotional mastery that preserves your strategic capacity, and psychological archaeology that reveals hidden motives. These are your defensive tools. But defense isn't enough when you're trapped in a web of manipulation. Now we enter dangerous territory, the tactics of liberation. The next laws are not for the faint of heart, as they require you to touch the darkest nature of human psychology. Prepare to learn not just how to protect yourself, but how to reclaim your power. Law 5. Use ego as a weapon, the poisoned mirror strategy. The ego is simultaneously humanity's greatest strength and greatest weakness. Learn to use it against your opponents. Every manipulator has an ego that can be exploited. Machiavelli observed that those who manipulate others are paradoxically the most vulnerable to manipulation of their own ego. Why? Because they need to feel superior, more intelligent, more cunning. This need creates a specific vulnerability. They cannot resist the opportunity to demonstrate their superiority. The fall of Ramiro de Orco illustrates this perfectly. Orco was Cesare Borgia's personal executioner, a brutal man who helped Borgia conquer several provinces through terror. But Orco developed an inflated ego. He began to see himself as indispensable, as the real power behind the throne. Borgia, perceiving this, began feeding this ego with praise and responsibilities. Orco, intoxicated by his own importance, relaxed his guard. When Borgia no longer needed him, Orco was found cut in half in the public square. His ego had been his ruin. He couldn't imagine that anyone would dare betray him. The toxic boss who always needs to be right, the narcissistic partner who needs to feel superior, the manipulative friend who needs to be admired. All have egos that can be strategically fed. When you make someone feel intellectually superior, emotionally more mature, or morally more evolved, you lower their defenses. Implement the ego mirror technique. When dealing with a manipulator, reflect back an amplified version of how they want to be seen. You're so intelligent to perceive this. Or you have a unique capacity for leadership. While they bask in the reflection of their own ego, you gain time and space to plan your exit. Law 6. Create secret alternatives. The art of multiple dependency. Never place all your emotional, financial, or social needs in one person. Dependency is the death of freedom. Diversify your sources of power. The manipulator's power comes from your dependency. The more you need them for validation, financial security, social connection, or personal identity, the more power they have over you. Machiavelli understood that independence is not a natural state. It's a strategic construction that must be carefully planned and maintained. Machiavelli himself exemplifies this. During his period as a diplomat, he never depended exclusively on the Medici's favor. He maintained correspondence with intellectuals throughout Europe, cultivated friendships with merchants, developed relationships with other politicians. When the Medici fell, Machiavelli didn't fall with them because he had diversified his connections. When he was exiled, he survived because he hadn't put all his eggs in the same political basket. The toxic person wants to be your only source of validation, your only source of entertainment, your only source of emotional support. They will actively work to isolate you from other people and opportunities. Why? Because your independence is the greatest threat to their control over you. Execute the phantom network strategy. Secretly, reconnect with old friends. Develop new hobbies that don't involve the toxic person. Build alternative income sources if necessary. Strengthen family relationships that were damaged. Do this discreetly. When you have real alternatives, you have real power of choice. Law 7. Document everything, creating objective reality. Memory is fallible, but records are eternal. Whoever controls the records controls the narrative of truth. Documentation is your anchor in reality. One of the manipulator's most powerful weapons is reality distortion. Gaslighting, as we call it today. They make you question your own memory, your perception, your sanity. Machiavelli knew that objective truth is a construction that must be actively preserved against those who try to rewrite it. Machiavelli's own writings are an example of this. When he was accused of conspiracy, he didn't depend solely on his word against the accusations. He had meticulously documented his activities, his correspondences, his political positions. Although he was tortured, the documentation eventually proved his innocence in many accusations. Without these records, he would have been just another victim of his enemies' political narratives. The partner who denies having said something you clearly remember. The boss who changes the terms of an agreement and swears it was always that way. The friend who distorts conversations to make themselves the victim. All are rewriting reality in real time, and your memory becomes unreliable under constant psychological pressure. Implement the reality diary. Record important conversations, decisions made, promises made. Use recording apps when legal. Keep emails and messages. It's not paranoia. It's preservation of sanity. When someone tries to rewrite history, you'll have objective proof of the truth. Law 8. Practice gradual exit. The evaporation strategy. Abrupt exit provokes violent reaction. Gradual exit is invisible until irreversible. Disappear slowly, like vapor. Machiavelli understood that power doesn't tolerate vacuums. When you suddenly remove your presence, energy, or resources from a toxic relationship, you create a vacuum that the person will try to fill through escalation, more manipulation, more pressure, sometimes even violence. Gradual exit avoids this reaction because it's not perceived as a threat until it's too late to reverse. Observe how Machiavelli himself withdrew from dangerous political situations. When he perceived that political winds were changing against him, he didn't resign dramatically or make grandiose declarations. He gradually reduced his participation in meetings, delegated responsibilities, transferred alliances. When he finally fell into disgrace, the transition was less traumatic because he had prepared the ground for his absence. Abrupt exit from a toxic relationship often results in stalking, emotional blackmail, social or professional sabotage. The person feels they've suddenly lost control and desperately fights to recover it. Gradual exit is less dramatic, but infinitely safer and more effective. Execute the evaporation technique. Gradually reduce contact frequency. Emotional intensity of interactions. Dependency in both directions. Become less available, less responsive, less invested. When you finally leave completely, your absence will seem like a natural progression, not a traumatic rupture. Law 9. Never explain your motives. The power of strategic silence. Explanations are ammunition for your enemies. Silence is an impenetrable fortress. The more you explain, the more vulnerable you become. Our social nature compels us to justify our actions, especially when they displease others. But Machiavelli realized that explanations are always a form of putting yourself on the defensive. When you explain, you're implicitly asking for approval, validation, permission. You're giving the other person the power to judge whether your motives are valid. When Machiavelli wrote The Prince, he was harshly criticized for revealing the dark tactics of power. Many expected him to explain his motivations, to justify why he revealed these secrets. Machiavelli refused. He never explained whether he wrote to educate the people about the nature of power or to flatter the Medici. This ambiguity protected the book and its author. No one could categorically say what his true intentions were. So the book survived multiple interpretations and political regimes. When you decide to leave a toxic relationship and try to explain why, you're giving the toxic person the opportunity to argue against each point, to distort your reasons, to make you question yourself. No is a complete sentence that requires no elaboration. Master the art of simple declaration. I've decided I need time. This relationship isn't working for me. I'm making changes in my life. Don't elaborate. Don't justify. Don't negotiate. Declare and execute. The silence that follows is your shield, not your weakness. Law 10. Recognize when war has already begun. Battlefield awareness. War has already begun when you still believe you're in a conversation. The greatest mistake is not recognizing you're being attacked. Machiavelli realized that most people lose conflicts because they don't recognize they're in one. While you operate under rules of civility, cooperation, and good faith, your opponent has already switched to rules of war, strategy, manipulation, and victory at any cost. It's like bringing a flower to a gunfight. Machiavelli's own political career illustrates this. For years, he operated as if he were in a collaborative environment of respectful diplomacy. Meanwhile, his rivals had already identified him as a threat and were actively working for his political destruction. When he finally realized he was at war, it was too late. His enemies had undermined his position from all sides. It was this experience that taught him the lesson he would later codify: recognize war before it destroys you. You're still trying to solve the relationship through honest conversations and compromise, while the toxic person has already decided you're the enemy. You offer vulnerability. They offer manipulation. You seek solution. They seek domination. You're playing different games. Implement the reciprocity test. For 2 weeks, monitor whether there's real balance in interactions. Are you giving more than you receive? Are your gestures of goodwill reciprocated or exploited? If there's a consistent pattern of imbalance, accept reality. You're not in a relationship. You're in a war you didn't know you were fighting. Together, these 10 laws form more than a self-defense system. They constitute a philosophy of self-determination, the observation that penetrates masks, information control that protects your essence, emotional mastery that preserves your strategic clarity, the archaeology of motives that reveals hidden intentions. These are the foundations. Upon them, we build advanced tactics, the strategic use of others' egos, creating alternatives that guarantee independence, documentation that preserves objective reality, gradual exit that avoids retaliation, silence that protects your flanks, and awareness that some relationships are, in fact, battlefields. Machiavelli taught us that naivety is not virtue when facing those who have transformed cruelty into art. In these 10 laws, you have found not just escape tools, but instruments of genuine freedom. This knowledge is a double-edged blade. It can be used to build or to destroy, to liberate or to enslave. The difference lies in intention. Use these laws to protect yourself, to free yourself, to reclaim your autonomy, never to become what you're fleeing from. True Machiavellian power is not in dominating others, but in never again allowing yourself to be dominated. Remember, the truly powerful person is one who doesn't need to use their power. They simply need to have it. And now, you do. In the comments, I want to know, which of these 10 laws resonates most deeply with your experience? Which situation did you recognize in your own life? Share your perspective. Sometimes, recognizing the pattern is the first step to breaking it. If this journey through the psychology of power and self-defense touched something in you, subscribe to the channel. We'll continue exploring the darkest and most illuminating corners of human nature. Knowledge is power, but only when applied. Your like is not just a gesture. It's a vote that this type of deep and transformative knowledge should reach more people. It's a declaration that you choose consciousness over naivety. Till the next encounter with truth, stay awake.